needful, and we start.
Greetings and a good morning to us all. Oh, am I audible?
Good morning,
Yes,
Chief. How
yes.
are
Good
you?
morning.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the patience. I used an extra 5 minutes there, but Thank you for being here and patiently waiting. Mr. MRD, is it okay? Shall we proceed?
Yes, we can go on.
Right. Okay, to the rest of our listeners, my name is Whizzy, and I have been attending a number of our sessions, and one of the things I want us to just share about today is the issue of floating loss. So, after noticing a number of people being in floating loss, I want us to just discuss a few approaches on how to trade, one, but secondly, how to manage floating loss. So, I hope our discussion is just going to center around those two. And for the discussion that we'll have, I will need a volunteer. I'll need a volunteer from the listeners who could help or aid our discussion in terms of if you have floating loss, because then we would have to use an example that is evident and valid, so we can base our discussions off of there, because different people definitely will have different cases of floating loss. But if you've noticed from the past few days, people have been bringing up their cases of floating loss, and each case is case by case. But yeah, I would like maybe to deal with someone. So if you're a volunteer and probably you could have the problem of floating loss, definitely not going to have the utmost solution, but we can look at a few ways you can approach it, and maybe a few mistakes that some of us make, especially some of us when we are beginning. Some of us make a few mistakes, and they end us in some terrible floating loss situations. Maybe we are going to be able to look at some of those as well, not to make such mistakes and to avoid those, so we don't get into such a situation. So, do we have any volunteer? Does anyone have the problem, floating loss, so that we can start from there? You can just maybe put up your hand, and then if you're in position to share your screen, keep your mic on, then maybe you are the best candidate. So, do we have anyone? Fortunately, today didn't come with any floating loss case, but probably we could have someone from the listeners. Anyone?
Let us go with
Yes,
bad.
I have
Okay,
it.
I see. Okay. Mukisa Badru,
Yes,
good morning to you. I hope you can share your screen. Are you in position?
yes.
All right. All right, go ahead. You can go ahead and share your screen, and let us start with that.
Okay. Anyway, let me first try to check. How I'm going to share my screen from here, by the way. Anybody can teach me how to share screen on this table, whatever.
Okay. On your application, you'll find a few dots at the bottom,
Yeah.
and when you tap those dots, you'll find one area that has an arrow pointing upwards. So if you have the kind that has words to have, share
Okay,
screen, but if
sharing.
it doesn't, just have
Okay.
the one that has an arrow pointing upwards. Tap that one, and then accept to share the screen. It will then come through. Your live, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Like
So,
we can see you very
how?
very clearly, sir.
Okay. Is there anything I can?
Okay, so this is good. This is good to start from here. I'm going to be asking you a few questions, and I hope we can have an interaction. So, according to what we see here, you have 3 tokens that you're trading, and they're all floating. Do you have a problem with that, or you're okay? Because first thing is, if floating loss is not an issue for you, then this is not for you. You get it? So, do you have an issue with them?
Of course, I have issue.
Which one do you have an issue with?
I must be having some profit now, but I'm stuck for over 127 days. That is how many months? 4 months.
On specifically this token, Steam?
No.
That is Steam, right? So, okay. The good thing for you as regards to case by case, people have floating loss of over 50%, 80%, 90%. So I think if this is the most floating token, in your case is it's a bit still fair. Sorry to say so, but it's still fair compared to other people. So you're seeing you have Steam, and we have margin calls. The first thing I'm going to look at is one, the trading mode that you're using, sub-bin real-time settlement. That is 1. 2, you have 20 margin calls that have so far been deployed. If you can scroll down, go ahead, scroll down. You have 5 margin calls that are pending, because the total limit of margin calls is 25. You have 5 margin calls that are pending, and then I think that is it. That is what's fair to understand here. Now, this was deployed in January on the 16th. I'm going to assume that by then you are still using the strategy that later on kind of improved on that strategy. Do you remember?
Yes,
later
but
on in
before,
February?
this one was before we changed the strategies according to downfalls, upwards, so we changed. But this one before, I was not able to change it because it was there already.
Okay.
I was unable to change.
Okay. So do you mean that with newer strategies you changed your approach to trading and you've not had a situation like this after? Is that what you mean?
No.
Sorry?
No, I was not having any issue because I was not trading.
No, I'm trying to say that I'm assuming that after changing the strategy, with the newer strategies, you've not had such a situation. Is that so?
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, for I'll see ONG, and probably maybe we can come to that. But for this case of Steam, let's just point out a few things that probably could have landed us in this kind of floating loss. So with Steam, first of all, the strategy does not support us. Now, one of the things that all of us, I would request all of us to remember, that is very, very key in crypto trading, the part of preserving your capital. Preserving your capital is your number one target while trading. And preserving your capital is going to include deploying a strategy that makes sure your capital is preserved. That is going to be number one thing. Deploying a strategy that is going to make sure your capital is preserved, regardless of if it is paying you less than you think you want to take out of the market. Now, here is where it becomes confusing, especially for beginners. Very many times when your capital is less, it is going to be the preservation of your capital, or keeping or maintaining your capital, is sometimes going to mean you're going to take lesser money from the market, but so that you don't get into a situation like this one, in times or in case when something does not go right, so that you don't get into a situation whereby you cannot trade anymore, or you have to wait for over 3 months, 4 months before your capital can get out, and then you start trading again. So we remember very well, our coach came out and told us, of course, the best capital preservation we can use is using the double up strategy. So with the double up strategy, you're going to be sure that I'm going to enter the market slowly, but I'm going to enter it at a pace whereby it is going to be preserved in case the coin dipped more than I expected it to dip. You get it? Eh? So with this, I see your position amount having $400, and your state is sub-bin real-time settlement at the moment, and you have currently margin calls running. Maybe the other thing I would like us to see is trade settings. Can you go to trade settings and we see your margin call configuration? Because that's going to be the other thing that we can look at. So did you change these settings at any point in time? Because I remember some of the strategies included having a first buying amount and then changing it later to something else and then letting it run like that. Did you do that?
No.
You did not. Okay, fine. So let's look at the story about Geoffrey. Okay, yeah. That's what I wanted us to look at. Multiple buying ratio, I'm seeing 0.15, and okay, that is 0.15.
What the market was?
Yeah, when the market was okay. It is okay. It is okay. So then margin call drop. At this part of margin call drop is where I'm very interested here. You have up to 25 strategies running, 25 margin calls running, and I'm going to be making the additions here. If you can read to me. Okay, just scroll to the bottom. Oh, it gets somewhere and you change them from the top.
I blocked it from 21 because the drop was almost in 55, something like that. So I broke it from 21 so that the margin off.
Okay. I see the kind of approach you used here. So that these calls never buy. That is the brain behind it. Eh? Okay,
Yeah.
so let us see. From the 20th call, you have a 2% drop. Where does it start from? The 2% drop. Where does it start from? You can scroll up. That 2%. It goes from the 20th call to around the 50th call. So from about 50th to 20th, those are about 15 calls. That is a 2% drop. Eh? So 15 times 2 is going to give us so you have a 30%. So that is a 30%, 31, 32, and then about 33, right?
Yes.
Because third call is 0.5, and I'm assuming the first call is also 0.5. Is that so?
Yes.
Can you scroll up to the first call? Okay. So you have fairly a 32% drop. 32% drop. So with the 32% drop, actually, one of the things I can tell you is that this distribution of capital and 30 calls would probably be fair enough to help you. However, the fact that you're entering the market with only 0.15, which is $15 after your first buy of $100. Now, entering the market with these multiple levels and entering with $15 does not help your situation. So I'm going to just pick a few details and then I'll be sharing my screen from there so that I can demonstrate how to use the double up strategy. In this case, I am going to demonstrate it technically so that we see what exactly it does. Now, the double up strategy is definitely going to be a better strategy in all of these situations. But I'm going to request you to show me, for example, your current average price and your first buy. At what point did those two things happen? Can you take us a screen before? Continue. Yep. Okay, so current average price is 2332. I'm going to just label that. Just keep it at that. Current price. Just a moment. Yes. Read that out to me.
Current price?
Yes. No. Average price. Current average price.
0.2332.
Okay. Thank you. For that, and then I want to see your entry price. The very first time you bought, how much did you buy the coin at? And how to find that out, we are going to go to fulfilled orders at the top there. Do you see fulfilled orders in the blue ribbon at the top? Yes. Now I want you to tap Steam. Go ahead and tap Steam. Go ahead and tap Steam. Can you scroll to the very bottom? Just scroll to the very bottom. To the very bottom. Yeah. Very bottom. To the very bottom. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay, just keep scrolling. It shouldn't be very far.
It has reached.
Okay, so the very first price we see, I want you to tap it open. Just tap it so that it expands and then scroll. Now
The
scroll.
red one?
No, just tap it once. You're over tapping it. Now scroll. Tap it. Tap it. Now scroll. Yes, scroll now. So we can see the deal amount is 99.99, which gives us the confirmation that this is the very first time you bought, because you first bought with $100, right? So the very first time you bought at 26.42, right?
Yeah.
So we are going to label that as well on my chart here. 26.42. 26.42. All right, I have it. I have the data on my chart. I'm just going to take over with the screen sharing, and I hope you can revert to your Google so you can see the screen. Yeah, Badru, can you see my screen now?
Let me check. I have to first stop sharing, right?
No, you just have to go back to your Google application, Google Meet.
Yes, I see you now.
Perfect. So, guys, as you can see, this is the very first time Badru bought this coin, and that is at 26.42. And then the average price came up to 23.32 right here, as you can see. Right now, I'm looking at Steam, and I'm on the daily time frame here, so that I can have a few candles on my chart. So that we can be able to see what I'm talking about. So when I measure from here, it should be around 30%. It's actually not bad. So when I measure here, we can see that from his average price up to his, from his first buying price up to his average price, it is just an 11% drop. So what does that mean? That means with the strategy that Badru was using, it was only able to pull his average price from his current price, from his very first entry price, by a mere 11%, only an 11%. However, the coin, as we have seen, continued to dip for as much as you can see, from his average price to the lowest part that this coin reached, which is this one. You see, this is the bottom. This coin reached a 56% floating at a certain point in time. The most that it reached was 56% in floating, and then the most it has recovered was a 25%. This high, the one that you're seeing here. So when it pumped from down here up to here, it pumped up to around 25%, at least up to 25%. And I think that is when some of his margin calls kind of paid back, and then because it was not enough to get him up here where this is his average price, to get him out, Badru's margin calls finally got him back, because when they sold, they bought again when the coin dipped back. So he came all the way up to around 25%, and then he went back to this bottom. As you can see, the coin got here and then it got back here, and it was floating 42 once again. You get it? So until the market will finally, the good thing that we see here is that the market got down at the bottom here, and then it started, because it started printing higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows. However, we have to wait for the market to finally print higher highs and higher lows, that is to maintain its upward trend, and then get back to his average price before it can finally give him his 3%, and Badru gets out of this token. So what is the situation here for Badru? The situation is actually not that bad. Why? Because the market is recovering, as we can see. That is the general trend of the market. The market was in a downtrend where it went all the way to 50, but now it is kind of recovering. It reached its bottom and it's now printing higher highs and higher lows. So what Badru has to do is to wait for the market to finally print higher highs and higher lows, higher highs and higher lows, and then kind of make it all the way to the top. As you can see, from about here, the market has to continue, and then probably here. So it has to continue. If the market finally, something happens in the market, God forbid, and it continues downwards by any reason, Badru is going to be continuously floating in this token until it gets to a point where it goes above his average price. Or if Badru gets some money and adds to replenish this strategy, so that this average price can come lower. That is if by any chance Badru gets some money and adds, let's say, and his average price comes up to about this level. That is from this level to this level. Then Badru can have a better chance of not waiting until when market comes to this point, but only waiting up to the point where market comes here, and then he gets out of floating loss. That is basically the science behind this thing. That is how it happens. Now, where can we correct, and what can we do about it moving forward? Now, if you deployed this very strategy, if you deployed your capital using the double up strategy, this is what goes down. This is what happens. Show it to us on the chart. On the chart, what happens is I'm going to use a different color for our layers. So let's say I have Badru, you have $400. That is $400 that was deployed in this strategy, right?
Yes.
Okay. So $400. Now, the approach is going to be, I'm going to try and use the same amount of money, but this time I'm going to use the double up strategy. So I'm going to calculate here with my $400, how much can I enter with as my first buying amount? I'm going to use a simple calculator that I developed, but I'm going to explain each and everything in a way that all of us can understand. Yeah. So we come here and I'm going to just enter my capital, which is $400, and it is going to show me which is the optimal first buying amount that I can use with $400. Let's say that is how much I want to trade this coin with. So I enter my $400 here, and it is going to show me what is viable here is I can only start with $6.3 as my first buying amount. I can only use 5 margin calls. That's the maximum amount of margin calls I can use for the amount of capital that I have. You get it? Eh? So if, for example, I had less capital, let's say 200, and I do this, you're going to see that it is going to bring down my very first margin call count to $6.5. You see it is shading for me green here to show me that these ones are not viable because Reiki won't allow you to enter with $3.2. So it means that even though it has been calculated, it is not viable. I can only use either 4 margin calls with the first buying amount of 6.5, or I can use 3 margin calls with 13.3, 2 margin calls with 28.6. Basically, it is showing me that I can use the double up strategy, but only use, for example, if I choose this one, I can only use 2 margin calls if I use my first buying amount as 28.6. But we all very well know that the more margin calls, the better you can benefit from the market. So my choice definitely has to be the one that is coming in that gives me the most margin calls, which is in this case 6.5. That is with my $200. So let us see if I had 100, for example. If I had 100, it is showing me that the best optimal amount of margin calls I can deploy with my capital using the double up strategy is going to be 3 margin calls, and my first buying amount will be 6.7. I can bring this down to 50, and when I bring it to 50, you can see it is showing me that I can only use 2 margin calls and starting with $7.1. With $50 double up strategy, I can only use 2 margin calls, and my first buying amount will be 7.1. Now I'm going to show you the other part of how to calculate and how to enter these exactly. So we said we are looking at $400. So $400 that Badru has, definitely with a double up strategy, I would have to start with $6.3, which is the optimal amount to give me 5 margin calls. Now, does it really give us 5 margin calls? Let us find that out. That if I use this 6.3, does it really give me 5 margin calls using $400? So that brings me here. I'm just showing you on this calculator, but I'm also going to calculate normally as you would on your own calculator on your phone so that you can see it. So let me pick this 6.3 that is appearing here, that is showing me 5 margin calls, and I just want to find out, does it really give me $400 if I have a first buying amount of 6.3 and use the double up strategy and deploy it at 5 margin calls. So I come here and I enter my 6.3 under FBA. So under FBA, as if I enter 6.3, we can see here that it is displaying to me. Now, let me just explain what's happening here. Now, using the double up strategy, here it is showing me first buying amount 6.3, first margin call. The capital that will be entering in your first margin call will be 12.6. That is after the first buying amount of 6.3. Now, I want you to look at this column as position amount. If your first buying amount enters 6.3, your position amount will be 6.3. If your first margin call enters, which is 12.6, that is this one times 2. That is this doubled up. Your first buying amount doubled up on your first margin call makes 12.6. The position amount will be 18.9. As you can see it here, that is definitely what is going to happen. The robot will enter with 25.2, giving you a total of 44.1. And onwards, it will enter with 50. That is, it keeps on doubling the previous entry for each margin call. So you can see this was 25, this one is 50, and the total amount will be 94. 50 by 2, that will be 100, and the total amount will be 195. And we said this one will only this is only to cater for $400. So we can see on the fourth call we have our capital entering them and giving us a total of 195. And then on the fifth margin call, we see our capital is going to be $201, which will bring us to a total of 396.9. Now remember, we said the strategy should cater for $400. So definitely that means that it has left some captured dollars because it cannot be exact. So if I get $400 minus 396.9, I'm definitely getting more remainder of $3. So that means the optimal amount of first buying will be 6.3 to get me to utilize my $400. And as you can see on the fifth margin call, it has given me something that fits exactly within my capital, because when I subtract 400 from 396.9, I get only a remainder of $3.1. So that is the best way I can trade with $400 using the double up strategy. Okay, That's the best way I can trade with $400 using the double up strategy. I would have to start with 6.3 as my first buying amount, and then distribute the rest of the margin calls in a percentage drop that will make sure that I do not get into a situation like, for example, what Badru got into. So we see that the coin dropped all the way to. We see that the coin dropped all the way. If I can measure again here, the coin dropped all the way from up here. Just a moment. Sorry. We see that the coin dropped away all the way from up here to down here, the lowest it got to, you see. So the coin got a drop of about 56%. So when we are distributing these margin calls, these my 5 margin calls after having a first buying amount of 6.3, when I'm distributing the 5 margin calls, I'm definitely going to give them a drop that is going to make sure that it takes in account at least something as maybe 45%. That is where my last margin call will probably sit. Now, I'm going to demonstrate what the double up strategy does. Or how we can actually benefit from it and actually trust in terms of avoiding floating loss for me. So we have seen how to distribute our capital. With our $400, we start with 6.3, and then we are definitely going to be looking at that. So I'm going to pick this robot, for example, in this case, and I'm going to come to my strategy settings, as you can see here, and then I'm going to add a new strategy. So we are adding our strategy of $400. I'm going to name it here, $400 and stroke. First buying amount is 6.3. I'm going to name it 6.3, and then I'm going to give it the number of margin calls, and my number of margin calls are definitely going to be 5 margin calls. So we saw here 6.3 as first buying amount, so I will put it here 6.3. And remember, we saw that our $400 can only fit in 5 margin calls, so I make sure that I include here only 5 margin calls, and then I can include my take profit ratio, which is 3. I will leave this at 0.01 if you so desire. There is no problem with that. Whatever you want to put here, it is okay. I'm going to just put that as 0.01 because I don't want to go into that, and then maybe leave that at 1 shot. So the key thing here is to make sure that I come at margin configuration and I configure my margin calls. So when I tap, one of the very first things that I'm going to see is I'm going to see the double up strategy automatically deployed here. Now that is one thing I don't want to tamper with. Under multiple buying ratio, I'm not going to touch anything here. I don't touch anything here because it has deployed the double up strategy for me. 2 times of the first buying amount, 16 times of the first buying amount, and 32 times of the first buying amount. Okay, so I do not touch this part. I don't. What I touch is this margin call drop, because if we add up this margin call drop, it is too little. It will not save me from floating loss. It is too little. You get it? So in this case, I'm going to just add this up, which is 3.5, so that we can see how little this is. So we add 3.5 plus 4 plus 4.5 plus, you can see 5.2 plus 5.2 plus, I see here we have 8 plus 8. And that is only a small drop of 25.2. But we've seen this coin dropped all the way to 50. So a percentage drop of margin call drop of only, we said, how much is it? We say of 25.2 will definitely still keep me in floating loss, because when this coin finally drops by 25, which is definitely halfway of this, and it stops there, then that means my average price is only going to come and it will only stop around halfway there. You get it? And then when the coin drops this much, I will still float. Now, floating is not a problem. What is not good and what is not okay is floating beyond what you should float. If you float more than 20%, more than 15%, that is a problem. You're not supposed, or you're not meant to float that much. At least that is not why they built Royal Tube. You're not supposed to float more than 20, more than 15, at least if you have your capital. Sometimes it is inevitable and unavoidable. For example, if you're trading with $50, anywhere around $120, $200, it might not be very easy to float less than 20%, but at least you shouldn't float more than 25. You get it? But if you have capital more than $150 and your capital is you're floating more than 25, 30, 40, that is beyond what? That is beyond normal. So it means that you should start deploying a strategy that keeps you out of floating loss. So let me first complete this part and then we go back to the chart. Okay, so this part we come and we need to increase this distribution. We need to see that at least with our $400 it can cover us a distribution of at least 50% market drop. So covering a 50% market drop, we can see the first drop here is 3.5, then the second is around 4. That is let's see, the 3.5 plus 4, that is around 7.5, and the third drop is plus 4.5. That gives this first, second, and third gets us to around 12%. So usually tokens can drop that 12%, and I don't like to move a lot about the first, second, and third call because usually coins can drop up to there. But when it comes to the fourth call, I want it to be farther away. So from 12% drop here, I want to extend my margin call drop from the fourth call. Now at this point, I want to put at least 15. So when I put 15 here, that is a 12 plus 15 gets me to a 27% drop. You see? So when I put a 15 there, that sees me up to that part 27. So if I'm at 27 and I add another 20% on top of 27, I'm definitely going to get to around 47%. You see? So that means down here at the bottom, I'm going to put a 20% drop. So when we add all of this up together, it will give us around 47. So 47 is basically shy of 50 by 3%. But because of how little this capital is, I might leave it at only 47%. 47%, or I can come and add that 3 there, so that the total gives us a 50% drop. A 50% drop. In this case, when the coin drops all the way to 50, I'm going to be sure that this strategy will at least see me through. But I don't like to move it so far, at least out to a percentage drop of that far. So we can see by adding 15 here and 20 here, I'm seeing that I have a percentage drop of up to about 47%. Now, let us see what exactly happens on the chart. When we use the double up strategy, this is one of the things that we can be sure of. When the coin drops, for example, this is a 12% drop we measured, and we saw that here, from up here, from our first buy to this level where Badru's margin calls stop, which is 11%, we've seen here we have 3 margin calls. In this case, we've distributed our capital and we have 3 margin calls, which is in this case it gives us a 12%. So it would definitely be around somewhere. Let me delete this and redraw it. So our first 3 margin calls will see us through to at least a 12%, somewhere around there. I'm just going to assume that is where it stopped. Yeah, it will see us around there. So 3 margin calls giving us up to 12%. You see the coin dropped, and then at that point it reached and it pumped. But when we see this pump, you see this wick that came through from the 12%. Yeah. So that definitely our margin calls are going to be slightly above, or rather our average price will have brought us slightly above the current price. Now we are assuming this is the current price, a 12% drop. Coin it dips like this. When it gets down here and it retraces a bit, yeah, you see this retracement, this mini retracement, 12%. When it makes this pump, it will get you out of the market.